Okay.
All right.
Hi, my name is Olivia,
And my name's John.
and we're from the Santa Barbara Middle School Team Press, and today we're here with...
Scott JUREK.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you guys. Yeah, pleasure.
You say that you believe everyone can run an ultra. What advice would you give to people aspiring to run and people aspiring to become vegan?
Well, I think especially to the younger crowd, I always tell them, save yourself, do the shorter distances. You can always run ultras at whatever age. So especially to middle schoolers and high schoolers, I'm always like, wait on the ultras. You have plenty of time. Keep your speed. As far as being vegan and running ultras, I think that the biggest aspect is have a willingness to learn and be open to possibilities. Changing my diet as well as running ultras has always taught me to keep my eyes and ears open and be willing to learn about things. I think that's one of the things that I learned most about a vegan diet is that it can be fun. It doesn't have to be this job, so you can have fun with it.
Continuing on that, what advice would you give to kids or teens around our age who want to pursue a vegan diet in a non-vegan household?
Well, it gets tricky. And I grew up hunting and fishing, and it definitely wasn't easy when we went vegan in college. But I think you have to be passionate and try to. I like to use the soft sell approach. I always would make food for other people and show them like, hey, it can taste great, or take them to a restaurant that you really like. I love ethnic food, and I always like showing people different cultures how they eat, and a lot of those foods are traditionally vegan. It's nothing like weird and out of the ordinary. So I like to do that. I think it's a real easy way to open up the conversation versus telling somebody like, you got to be vegan to save animals, or you got to be vegan to save the environment. Sometimes that works, but sometimes the older generations aren't as open to that.
So, being a professional runner, you're sponsored by Cliff Bar. Do you think that they've done an adequate job integrating vegan products into their lines?
Well, that's the beautiful thing is that Cliff Bar actually is close to, I don't know the exact, if it's 80 or 90% organic ingredients across the board now. They only have a couple of products that aren't vegan. So everything, for the most part, I can eat. I think they have 2 products that have whey protein in them. And it's great to see a company so focused of their size on plant-based foods, organic, environmental initiatives. And so I feel like it's a great company. Of course, some people might, I know some people are really picky about ingredients and say, well, soy isolates aren't the best way to get protein. And they're also balancing for such a big company, they have to find products or ingredients that they can get on a large scale. And so as more and more products like pea protein, they're starting to use that now in some of their nut butter filled bars. I'm really psyched because I like to see other things besides just the soy protein, because I think we get a lot of soy protein around, and that's the go-to. But I love seeing things like pea protein, brown rice protein. I do soy, and I'm not, anti-soy, but it's nice to see like a mix of protein sources in there that are plant-based.
Do you feel that there are any other major brands that have been being progressive in vegan and environmental issues?
I think a lot of the food brands, not necessarily sports food brands, I have been very interested in the natural food industry ever since even before I became vegan. I went to my first co-op when I wanted to make, when I was in high school, I was on the ski team, and I talk about this in Eat and Run. I wanted to make this granola recipe that one of my fellow skiers had, his mom had made all these like cool foods, and one of the granolas was like out of this world. And I'm like, I want to learn how to make that. So I went to a co-op and learned about these ingredients that I could get. And so I've always been fascinated with the natural food industry, and I think a lot of them are putting forth initiatives, whether it's on the environmental side or in terms of non-GMO products, organics, and they've always been a part of those movements. And it's great to see sport food companies getting involved, and I think we're seeing more and more of that happening. Again, Cliff Bar isn't the only brand that's doing that. We're seeing some of the smaller brands, and now you're seeing the companies, whether it's Power Bar or some of these other companies now, even Kind Bar, they're seeing, we got to get into this organic game. So even though they're not as seen as progressive, they're starting to make that turn. And I think that's a great thing. We obviously, I run for Cliff Bar, but it's great to see that they're influencing and and making a change among some of these companies that never have been interested in making those changes.
Why do you think so many of the negative misconceptions about vegans came to be, and what myths do you hope this film combats?
Well, I think the biggest thing is, and what the film is trying to target is not just endurance athletes like myself. I think it's easier, especially endurance athletes seem to be more open to it or have been over the years. But I used to get a lot of fun poked at me, even from my buddies, where they're like, oh, you're eating that rabbit food, that's not going to make you strong to run ultra marathons. Because what I do takes a lot of strength, running up and down mountains and running the distances that I do. It's not just a fast, quick endurance event. So the biggest misconceptions, I think, are around strength and being powerful and being strong. And that's what this film is trying to combat. And having NFL football players, having martial arts athletes, having boxers, having bodybuilders, that's a big change and a shift that a lot of people haven't heard that message. Even though I've seen these athletes performing, getting their stories out on a wider scale, especially for young people, because in high school, middle school, you're taught, like, in order to be strong, you have to drink milk, you have to eat meat. And I was there too, because I was, wanting to be big and strong, and I was one of these like scrawny kids that got picked on all the time. And I think Patrick is a great role model where, he wasn't the biggest, and he was, I think, a lot of young people that are really trying to figure out their way in life. It's hard when, like, body image is such a big part of that. And so I think showing people that you can be strong and you can do things on a vegan diet is really important.
I'm vegan too, and among other things, every time that someone finds out that I'm vegan, they always throw out the, oh, I'm interested in that, or oh, I've tried that, but I could never stick to it, or that kind of thing. What advice would you give to someone who has that sort of mindset?
Well, you have to start somewhere, and I think the really cool thing that you're seeing, even in, you have to be at a progressive school, because some schools, but schools or groups, it might be a challenge, maybe amongst a sports team or a band or arts team or something like that, or arts group within a school. I think it's fun to have challenges where, okay, everybody in the group is going to go vegan on Monday. The Meatless Monday is a great way to introduce people, like, oh, it's actually not that hard. Also, I think showing people how you can prepare food easily, or eating out, because it's easy to go to a Mexican restaurant or a burrito place and eat vegan and show. And so, like, the film showed these athletes eating these foods who normally eat, at these restaurants, whether it's McDonald's, Popeyes, very popular with young college and high school kids. It's great to see them saying, oh, this is actually not too bad. Oh, it's good food. So you have to, do it in a way that gets people. Sometimes a challenge is a great way to do it, and sometimes just showing people it's really not that hard. But there's a barrier sometimes to that, for sure.
So you mentioned hunting and fishing within your youth. So the change to being a vegan must have been quite a surprise to your family. What was their reaction, and how did you deal with this?
So sometimes when I would come home during my college years, I would just, sometimes it wasn't worth arguing because my family's pretty, hunting and fishing is a big part of the lifestyle. I also grew up, having gardens though, and grandmothers that made homemade food and bread. And so I kind of had this unique, hunting and fishing, but also very do-it-yourself in the kitchen, grandparents and aunts and my mother. So I think I had that emphasis to that food needs to taste good, and it's part of tradition and family. But I would just avoid, I'd say, yeah, I got some ham already. Like when the meat was passed around, it was sometimes not worth it to get into an argument. Some people's families, though, it's easier to have conversations. So for mine, I found myself not getting into the argument too much, and sometimes making a dish or something, and they'd try that and wow, that tastes like meat. Or I'd use bulgur wheat in the chili recipe, and people were like, wow, I thought I was eating ground beef that was had that texture. So I think the soft sell approach works for especially very stubborn family members, and sometimes not getting into too many fights, because diet and food it's like religion or politics. It can be very emotionally charged. So I found I have to gauge my audience, and if it's a family member or a family gathering where people are what, you don't eat chicken? That's vegetarian. my family still thinks chicken is vegetarian. So I think the lesson there for those of us who are vegan is, like the film, you have to be understanding of other groups and where they're coming from, because it can be very easy to kind of like close ourselves off from, oh, I don't want to talk to that person because they have different views than me, or I don't want to get in an argument. So you just have to know how to approach things, and I think that's what's the challenge nowadays, especially for young people, is how do we get people excited about issues like this. And that's what this film festival is all about, getting people energized to go out into the real world, because we're all passionate about these things, whether it's the environment or the outdoors or animals and environmental issues. But we have to go back to the real world, where it can be very difficult.
During your transition, did you transition like overnight, or was it a process, and what did you do?
It took a year and a half, and I tell a lot of people that take your time. Some people go cold turkey. I have friends where they've been able to just I'm going to be, after sometimes even watching a film like this, I've had people come up to me like, I'm going to be vegan tomorrow, 100%. Other people like myself, it took a year and a half, and don't beat yourself up. For me, I still had some dairy. I still had salmon occasionally as I was transitioning, and I went full vegan, a year and a half later. So it's one of those things, like, even after you go vegan, if you get yourself in a situation where, and I mentioned this in my book, I was in the middle of Virginia, and a good friend of mine, his wife had made me vegetarian lasagna, and he's like, oh, Nancy's made you great vegetarian lasagna, and I was like, awesome. And it turns out it was like the white cream sauce full of cheese lasagna. And in that situation, I ate it because somebody went to the lengths of actually making something vegetarian. She didn't realize I didn't eat dairy, and so I think there are instances like that where it's not like you're I think some people think, oh, I tainted myself, so I might as well go back to eating meat. And I think you can always, there are situations where sometimes you don't always have to eat meat, but you might have to, especially when I've been in Europe or remote Mexico, I've had to, okay, these beans are probably not going to have, or they're going to have lard, they're not going to be vegan, and I've eaten those. But I've never had to eat meat or flesh. It's more really the dairy issue, or sometimes the fat that they use is not fully plant-based. And I tell people that because I want them to feel like, hey, I can still be a vegan, and I'm not ruining, a year of like going vegan, or 2 years just because one time I had to have dairy or some type of that wasn't totally vegan.
And finally, if you could give us one homework assignment to take back home, what would it be?
Oh, homework assignment. I would be, I'd say get in the kitchen and cook. I think with young people, especially nowadays, because it's so easy to eat out and fast food. And I even see I consider myself still young. People in their 30s and 40s don't like to cook, I found. Very few people do. So especially in your generation, I would say get in the kitchen and cook, because that's something that was given or passed down to me from my grandparents, my aunts and uncles, and my mother. We always spent time in the kitchen cooking good meals, and it's a great way to bond as a family and bring people together. And I think that's sometimes lost when we're like so busy and this fast-paced rat race and lifestyle, that it's just sometimes good to share a meal. So my homework assignment would be get in the kitchen and cook, and whatever that is, even if it means not 100% plant-based. Just get in the kitchen and start cooking wholesome food and eating more whole foods. So that's why today, when I was saying I didn't eat only 2 salads on the Appalachian Trail, again, that was normally I love, green leafy vegetables and whole grains, but there are certain circumstances where you don't. So again, eat your fast food occasionally and like vegan comfort food, but get in the kitchen and cook down home wholesome food too, whole foods.
Thank you so much.
Awesome.
I was going to ask you one more
Yeah.
question.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, sure.
Do you feel that extremely reduced meat and animal product diet would work similarly to a vegan diet, or do you think to get the full effect you have to go fully vegan?
Well, there's some debate, and I'm a little bit more, again, I'd rather see 80-90% of our population go plant-based, say, even half the time, 50%. If you think about that, if half of the world population went plant-based, 3-4 days of the week, that would be a huge win. So I think films like this, that would be the ultimate goal. Now, you're going to get people who are going to go the 100%. There are the people who have heart disease or diabetes or something going on health-wise where no doubt if they went plant perfect, like Dr. Estelstein, where they don't use oils, that's like a next level vegan plant-based diet, but there are people who do need to go that route. But if we could get more people eating even one day a week, it's astronomical the impact we can have environmentally, health-wise. We know health-wise would be better if you did it all the time, but if we can get people eating less meat, even a few days a week, it would be huge. So I guess I side with more of that, but there's going to be a tide, and we're seeing it already shifting, where more and more people are going to go 100%, and I'm excited about that too.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Great questions. You guys are well, and you're both vegan?
No,
Okay,
I'm
you're going.
vegetarian.
He will tomorrow after watching the film, right? Yeah,
Thanks.
awesome. And you guys are, what school in Santa Barbara? Santa Barbara Middle School. Oh, the public school there. Great.
It's
Awesome.
a private school,
private.
but
It's a private school. Okay,
But,
it's Santa Barbara Middle School.